So I'm using a piece of 0.7 thick sterling for the base, and we just make sure it's nice and flat. Check once again, make sure the bezel is nice and flat. Now at this point we're just going to flex the inside, put our soldered chips around the inside, and solder it. So I have it sitting on my charcoal block, and I'm just going to run my flex brush around the inside. We don't need a huge amount of flux, but we do need flux where the two pieces of metal touch. So now I'm just going to use my solder cutters, and I'm going to just cut the solder chips and drop them right inside as I cut them. Lovely. And you can use your solder pick or your flux brush, and we just need to push these so that we have a piece of solder, a gap going all the way around. So now, get our nice neutral flame. I'm using a Smith's mini torch for this one. Slowly dry out your flux just to make sure that the solder stays in position. Because if you dry it out quickly, and sometimes if you dry it out slowly, the solder will jump around, jump away from where it's supposed to be. If you just keep it warm, keep the metal warm, you can push the solder back in place using your solder pick. And we just want it to touch the base and the bezel at the same time. Now what I'm going to do is just circle just inside the bezel. We don't want to heat the top of the bezel, otherwise when the solder melts it'll jump up the side of it. So I'm just circling. You can see how the flux has gone clear down inside, and shortly the solder will flow. And when it flows you'll be able to see it around the outside of the bezel. Soon. And always keep circling. If you focus your flame in one spot, it's quite easy to melt the bezel. And you can see how the flux is actually leached underneath the bezel. So it's keeping all of the metal clean. And there it goes. So you should be able, as you're running your flame around, you should be able to see the solder come to the outside underneath the bezel, and you should be able to see it all the way around. When you can, stop, quench, and pickle, and then have a better look. If you're unsure whether this is soldered or not, or if you have a couple of spots that you're pretty sure haven't soldered, a little bit of flux around the inside, another couple of pieces of solder where you don't think it's soldered well, because it's always better to have slightly too much than slightly too little of this. And make sure you get it now, because once you've started cutting the base off and trying to make it nice, it's too late. It's difficult to fix it. So I'm just warming the flux, pushing the solder where I want it, and then we just heat it again. Yeah, lovely. I can see the solder all the way around, and that's what I want. So now we'll quench and pickle. So take the piece out of the pickle, dry it, have a good look, and you should be able to see a nice shiny line of solder inside and out. Now, if you want to put decoration around this, we need to do that before we trim the material back to the bezel. So if you're going to put little melted balls or twisted wire, whatever, around this, do it now, solder it, and then cut it out. Or if you're going to leave it plain and cut it out, just cut it out now. And we want to saw this back to within about 1/2 millimeter of the bezel. So just cut slightly outside the bezel, and don't lean your saw in so you cut the bezel. Make sure you keep the saw straight up and down. So now file your material back so that it just touches the bezel, and I would suggest you just hold it in your fingers, because if you try to brace it against your bench peg, it's going to bend the bezel over and make your life more difficult. You don't have to file the base all the way until it touches the bezel. If you don't want to, you could leave it slightly proud. It's not a bad look, but it's not the look I want. So for me, I just file until it just touches the bezel, and then I'll stop at that point and use 400 grade sandpaper on a sanding stick. Now, when I originally soldered the bezel together, I didn't do any cleanup on it, because now is the time to clean it up, because the base will support it, and you won't distort the bezel trying to clean it up. If you try to clean it up before it's soldered to the base, because it's annealed, and it's so soft you'll destroy your bezel. And you can see how easy that was to clean up now. After you get it filed back, use your sanding stick, starting with 400 grade, wet or dry. And when you get all of your file marks out, graduate to 600, then 1000 grit, and then after 1000 stop, because it'll just take the smallest amount of polishing on Tripoli to make the piece nice and shiny. So you want just a dull finish on all of it. Get rid of your file marks. Now, if you want to pierce a design in the back, do it now. And I usually suggest piercing it from the inside because it's easier to hold it against the bench peg and it's easier to see that you don't cut into your bezel. I'm just going to make this a plain one. I'm going to make the ring shank now, and I'm going to solder the ring on a bit like that. So I'm going to solder it onto either side rather than going all the way around. So just cut your ring shank the way you would normally. The inside diameter of the ring plus the thickness of the wire times 3.14. And anneal the piece, and then we'll form it around the ring mandrel without soldering it, so that we make sure we get our setting the correct height. I'll show you.